Between them, they created some of the great traditions that are held dearly by Australia and New Zealanders today. The traditions of fighting against obstacles that are overwhelming. So I'm standing in the middle of Anzac Parade. Anzac, of course, means the Australia and New Zealand Army Corps. The corps of army soldiers who were assembled in Egypt to go and fight in Gallipoli in 1915. When Canberra was laid out, it was decided that we would recognise that contribution made by Australia and New Zealand together and the tradition that had built up around the whole idea and symbolism of the word Anzac, to create a grand parade that runs up through the middle of Australia's national capital, Canberra. And this parade runs between the lake and the War Memorial and up to Mount Ainslie behind me, and is the most significant road in the whole of the city. Along the edges of the parade are memorials to various events that have occurred in Australian and New Zealand history in the fields of war. And they recognise the contributions that have been made in those events. But more importantly, in a way, the symbolism of this space is very powerful. The trees on either side are Australian eucalypts, and they represent the Australia in Anzac, and they dominate the edges of this grand space. The shrubs on the beds behind me are hebes from New Zealand, and these recognise New Zealand in that Anzac word. But the ground that I'm standing on is red gravel, and this red gravel brings together the symbolism of the Australian trees, the symbolism of the New Zealand shrubs, and the contributions Australians and New Zealanders have made together in war and often in death, and the blood that's been spilt by them together in this space. So it represents, in a very powerful way, this linking of the Australian and New Zealanders in this most symbolic area and parade of the nation's capital. What a powerful representation this arch has right here in the middle of Canberra, in the heart of Australia, Canberra being the nation's capital. This arch here and a similar one on the other side of this parade are the handles of a large basket, which when carried by two people together can carry a much heavier weight than a smaller basket could by one person on their own. And the symbolism of this basket, this Maori basket, comes from the coming together of the Australian and New Zealanders at the beginning of last century. Between them, they created some of the great traditions that are held dearly by Australia and New Zealanders today. The traditions of fighting against obstacles that are overwhelming, being resolute even in defeat, mateship, helping one another, working together. And these ideas are now built into that word called Anzac. We often refer to the Anzac tradition, and it comes from that formation of those troops in those early days and is represented here in Canberra by this amazing basket. And what greater honour could there be for Australia and New Zealand, for New Zealanders in Australia, to see this part of the city recognising the cooperation between Australia and New Zealand and the history that that has represented over 120 years. I hope you've enjoyed this clip, and look, Canberra Guided Tours runs fantastic trips all around the Canberra district. If you've liked what you've seen, we do stories about people, we do stories about places, we do stories about fascinating buildings. So please come to Canberra. When you're here, check out Canberra Guided Tours, and we'd love to see you along on one of our trips one day. Thank you.